Harnessing neuroplasticity through daily habits is one of the most powerful and scientifically grounded strategies to transform your life over the course of 6 months. Neuroplasticity refers to the brain's ability to change and rewire itself in response to experience. This is not a philosophical idea. It is a biological fact. Neurons, which are the cells of the brain and nervous system, form networks that encode behaviors, beliefs, and skills. These networks are not fixed. They change based on what you do repeatedly. So, when we talk about harnessing neuroplasticity, we're talking about deliberately engaging in behaviors that teach your brain to function in more focused, resilient, and effective ways. The most important aspect to understand about neuroplasticity is that it is exercise dependent. That means your brain does not simply change because you want it to. It changes because of what you do. Repetition, emotional intensity, and attention all increase the likelihood that a new behavior will physically rewire your brain. But this doesn't happen randomly. There are specific windows of opportunity where neuroplasticity is more available, and if you design your day correctly, you can open those windows and deliberately shape the architecture of your brain. One of the most practical ways to do this is by implementing a consistent morning routine. Waking up at a regular time and immediately exposing your eyes to sunlight or bright, natural light begins a cascade of biological processes. Light hits specialized cells in your retina called intrinsically photosensitive retinal ganglion cells, which send signals to your hypothalamus, the brain's master clock. This synchronizes your circadian rhythm, regulating the release of hormones like cortisol and melatonin, and it sets the timing of your alertness, energy, and mood for the entire day. What's crucial here is that consistent light exposure in the morning increases your capacity for focus and learning later in the day. In a very real way, this simple habit primes the brain for plasticity. Movement early in the day, such as walking, stretching, or light exercise, complements this light exposure by stimulating the release of epinephrine and dopamine, both of which are critical for alertness and motivation. When you begin your day with movement and light, you're not just preparing to be productive. You are shifting your brain into a plastic state where it becomes more receptive to change and learning. This is what neuroscientists refer to as a metaplastic state, a condition where the brain is especially ready to adapt. From there, daily habits like focused work blocks, skill learning, or even emotional regulation practices can build on this heightened plasticity. When you engage in a challenging task that demands your full attention, your brain allocates resources towards solving that task. If you do this repeatedly, the networks involved in focus, problem solving, and memory strengthen over time. This is why consistency matters. A single day of focused work is not enough to cause structural change, but doing it 5 days a week for several weeks sends a clear signal to your brain. This is important. Keep these connections strong. Another key factor in utilizing neuroplasticity effectively is understanding the role of rest. Neuroplastic changes do not occur during the learning process itself. They occur afterward, during sleep and periods of deep rest. Sleep is where your brain consolidates the information and skills you practiced during the day. The hippocampus and neocortex engage in a kind of neural dialogue, transferring new experiences into long-term storage. Skipping sleep or disrupting its natural rhythm weakens this process. Therefore, sleep isn't just recovery, it's reinforcement. If you're serious about transforming your life, protecting your sleep is non-negotiable. Deliberate rewiring also includes managing what you don't do. The brain has limited attentional resources and each distraction, whether it's social media, multitasking, or chaotic environments, disrupts the focus states required for deep learning. Every time you shift attention, there's a cognitive cost. That cost accumulates. If your day is filled with fragmented attention, you may still feel busy, but your brain will not enter the deep plastic states required for meaningful change. This is why time blocking, digital hygiene, and environmental design are critical tools. You're not just organizing your schedule, you're shaping your brain's input stream. Lastly, emotional state matters. The brain is more likely to rewire in response to experiences that are emotionally salient. This doesn't mean you need to be stressed or anxious. In fact, those states often reduce plasticity. What it does mean is that your habits must be tied to a meaningful goal or sense of purpose. When your actions are aligned with something that matters to you, the neuromodulators involved in attention and plasticity, especially dopamine, are released more robustly. This accelerates learning. It also increases the likelihood that you'll stick with a habit long enough to see results. Over 6 months, the cumulative effect of these practices is profound. You're not just changing your behavior. You're changing the way your brain is wired to operate. And once those new pathways are established, they become automatic. They require less effort to maintain. This is the true power of neuroplasticity. Small, deliberate actions performed daily can completely reshape your mind, your habits, and your future. Mastering circadian alignment is one of the most impactful science-based strategies for enhancing performance, mental clarity, emotional stability, and overall well-being. The circadian rhythm is not just about sleep. It is the body's internal 24-hour clock that governs almost every biological process, from hormone release and metabolism to attention and mood regulation. When your behaviors are aligned with your internal clock, your brain and body operate in a state of biological harmony. When they are misaligned, you experience fatigue, brain fog, low motivation, and disrupted health. The key to long-term transformation lies in understanding and intentionally aligning your life with this powerful rhythm. The master circadian clock in humans is located in a region of the brain called the suprachiasmatic nucleus, SCN, which sits in the hypothalamus. This clock is primarily synchronized by light. When light enters your eyes, specifically morning sunlight, it activates a set of retinal cells that communicate directly with the SCN. This light signal effectively sets the timing for your brain's clock, which then orchestrates the timing of other clocks throughout the body, including those in your liver, gut, muscles, and even your immune system. Morning sunlight exposure is not optional if you're aiming for cognitive and physical optimization. It's essential. The ideal time to get this light exposure is within the first 30 to 60 minutes after waking. This sends a strong signal to your circadian system, effectively anchoring your sleep-wake cycle and beginning the cascade of hormone releases that shape your day. One of the first hormones released in response to this light is cortisol, not the stress hormone in the negative sense, but a healthy morning surge of cortisol that boosts alertness, readiness, and metabolism. This surge is critical because it influences your ability to concentrate and move into a productive state early in the day. Delaying or missing this light exposure can lead to a sluggish start, difficulty focusing, and disrupted sleep later that night. In parallel, melatonin, the hormone that helps you fall and stay asleep, is suppressed in the presence of light. This is exactly what you want in the morning. However, exposure to bright artificial light, especially blue light, from screens late at night delays melatonin onset and confuses your internal clock. This is one of the main reasons people experience poor sleep quality or feel tired even after a full night's rest. They are sending mixed time signals to their brain. Circadian alignment is not just about what you do in the morning, it's about managing light exposure throughout the entire day and especially in the evening. Dim your lights 2 to 3 hours before bed, avoid screens close to bedtime, and consider using warm, colored bulbs or blue light blockers if exposure is unavoidable. Beyond light, like size and nutrition, timing also plays a powerful role in circadian regulation. Eating at irregular times or late into the evening can desynchronize your body's peripheral clocks, especially those in the digestive system. Your body needs consistent feeding windows to optimize digestion, energy production, and fat metabolism. The science suggests a strong benefit to eating your first meal 1 to 2 hours after waking and finishing your last meal 2 to 3 hours before sleep. This window supports hormonal balance, improves insulin sensitivity, and allows your body to complete essential repair processes during the night. Physical activity is another critical tool for reinforcing circadian rhythms. Morning or early afternoon exercise enhances the amplitude of your circadian signals, meaning your body experiences a sharper distinction between active, alert states during the day and restful, regenerative states at night. Consistency here is key. Even a 20-minute brisk walk can help reinforce the timing of your biological clock. Evening workouts are not necessarily harmful, but they can delay melatonin release if done too close to bedtime, especially if accompanied by bright lights and elevated arousal levels. Sleep timing is, of course, a major component of circadian alignment. But it's not just about duration, it's about regularity. Going to bed and waking up at the same time every day, including weekends, strengthens your circadian rhythm and improves sleep quality. Irregular sleep schedules confuse the brain's timekeeping mechanisms, leading to what's known as social jet lag, a state where your internal clock is misaligned with your actual behaviors. Over time, this can impair memory, concentration, mood stability, and even metabolic health. If you want to enhance focus, learning, and motivation, prioritize a consistent sleep-wake schedule. One often overlooked but essential element of circadian alignment is temperature regulation. Your body temperature naturally rises during the day and falls in the evening to prepare for sleep. You can support this cycle by engaging in physical movement during the day to elevate core body temperature and taking a warm shower or bath about 90 minutes before bed. The warm exposure causes a rebound cooling effect that helps your body reach the lower core temperature needed to fall asleep efficiently. Everything in your physiology is timed. The more your behaviors sync with your body's natural rhythms, the less resistance you face in achieving peak performance. Focus feels easier. Willpower becomes less necessary. You're not pushing against biology, you're flowing with it. Over a 6-month period, circadian alignment amplifies all other success strategies. Learning becomes faster, habits more automatic, recovery more complete. You're not just working harder, you're working in rhythm with your deepest biological intelligence. This is what it means to master circadian alignment. It is the silent foundation of high performance. Using stress as a catalyst rather than a crutch is a powerful shift in mindset and physiology that can radically transform the way you perform, think, and grow. Stress is often misunderstood as something purely negative, something to avoid at all costs. But the human nervous system evolved not only to survive stress, but to adapt and grow from it, if it's applied strategically. The key lies in understanding how stress works in the body, how to regulate it, and how to use it as a controlled input for greater focus, resilience, and neuroplastic change. Stress, at its core, is a physiological response designed to prepare the body for action. It activates the sympathetic nervous system, releasing hormones such as adrenaline and cortisol. Heart rate increases, attention sharpens, and the body mobilizes energy to respond to the perceived challenge. This is not a flaw in the system, it's a survival feature. The same mechanism that kept our ancestors alive in life, threatening situations, can be trained to enhance performance in modern life. But the difference lies in perception and application. Chronic, uncontrolled stress, the kind caused by uncertainty, poor boundaries, or lack of recovery, damages the brain and body. However, acute, controlled stress, applied intentionally and followed by recovery, strengthens the nervous system, increases focus, and improves mental and emotional flexibility. Controlled exposure to stress is a form of neural training. Take cold exposure as an example. Immersing yourself in cold water, even for just a few minutes, triggers the same sympathetic response that stress does: rapid heartbeat, shallow breathing, elevated alertness. But because you chose the stressor, and because it's temporary and predictable, your brain learns to manage it. Over time, this builds what scientists call top-down control. Your prefrontal cortex becomes more efficient at regulating your amygdala, the brain's fear and panic center. This translates directly into real-life situations. You become calmer under pressure, better at making decisions, and less reactive to emotional triggers. Another powerful tool for stress adaptation is breath work. Breath is a unique biological lever because it is both automatic and controllable. By deliberately adjusting your breathing pattern, you can shift your state of arousal almost instantly. For example, if you're feeling overwhelmed or anxious, extending your exhales, a technique known as physiological sighing, activates the parasympathetic nervous system and brings the body back into a state of calm. On the other hand, if you need to boost alertness and energy, short, rapid inhalations followed by slow exhales can stimulate arousal and readiness. This gives you agency over your nervous system, allowing you to respond to stress rather than being dominated by it. What's critical to understand is that stress, when framed and experienced correctly, is actually a signal for growth. The concept of hormesis describes this perfectly: a small, manageable dose of something stressful, whether it's physical exertion, fasting, cold, or even cognitive challenge, triggers a compensatory adaptation that makes you stronger. Your body and brain don't get better by staying comfortable. They get better by being stressed in precise, strategic doses, and then allowed to recover. It's in the recovery phase, after the stress, that growth happens. Proteins are synthesized, neural circuits are strengthened, and new emotional patterns are encoded. To make stress a catalyst, not a crutch, you must also shift your psychological relationship to it. People who perceive stress as harmful tend to experience more negative effects from it. But those who understand that stress can enhance focus and performance often perform better under pressure. This is known as the stress is enhancing mindset. Training your brain to see stress as preparation rather than threat changes your hormonal response. Cortisol levels may still rise, but without the downstream anxiety and health consequences typically associated with chronic stress. In fact, the presence of stress can increase attention, memory formation, and learning if it's perceived as meaningful or tied to a goal that matters to you. Another important piece is managing recovery. Just as athletes train hard but prioritize rest, your brain requires strategic periods of decompression. This doesn't mean hours of distraction or passivity. True recovery involves low stimulation, restorative activities like slow walks, meditation, creative expression, or even focused journaling. These states shift your brainwaves and help reestablish autonomic balance. Without recovery, even the best stress exposure protocols can become damaging over time. But with proper recovery, stress becomes a tool for sculpting your nervous system, sharpening your mental edge, while deepening your emotional resilience. Incorporating intentional stress practices into your weekly routine, such as cold exposure 3 times a week, moderate fasting, high-intensity interval training, or public speaking challenges, trains your system to meet discomfort with clarity rather than panic. Each exposure expands your stress threshold. You become less reactive, more aware, and more capable of acting intentionally under pressure. This adaptation bleeds into every area of life work, relationships, creativity, and problem solving. When you consistently expose yourself to voluntary, structured stress followed by adequate recovery, you're not only managing stress better, you're turning it into fuel. You're teaching your brain and body that pressure does not mean panic, that discomfort can be productive, and that growth often hides behind challenge. Over time, this practice makes you mentally tougher, more emotionally intelligent, and biologically equipped to handle whatever life throws your way. You stop fearing stress and you start using it. This is what it means to make stress a catalyst instead of a crutch. The power of focused deep work and deliberate practice is foundational for anyone aiming to make meaningful, measurable progress in any domain over a 6-month period. In a world filled with distractions, multitasking, and constant novelty, the ability to sit down, concentrate deeply, and apply sustained cognitive effort to a single task is both rare and incredibly valuable. This ability is not simply about willpower. It's about neurobiology, training, and structure. Focused work changes the brain, and over time, this structural change enhances your capacity to learn, retain, and create at levels that feel almost exponential. Deep work refers to a state of uninterrupted, high concentration engagement with a cognitively demanding task. This could be writing, problem solving, studying, or skill development, anything that requires your full mental resources. When you engage in this kind of work, your brain enters a heightened state of focus where distractions fade and attention narrows. Neurologically, this is supported by the activation of the prefrontal cortex and the release of neuromodulators such as acetylcholine, dopamine, and norepinephrine. These chemicals not only increase signal-to-noise ratio in the brain, helping you focus on what's important, but also enhance synaptic plasticity, the process by which learning occurs. This is why deep work is not just productive, it's transformative. When you engage in focused effort, especially when it's difficult or uncomfortable, you signal to your nervous system that the task matters. The brain then allocates resources to that task, rewires itself to perform better the next time, and strengthens the circuits involved in focus, memory, and skill. But this doesn't happen randomly or by accident. It requires intentional design, creating blocks of time free from distractions, setting specific goals, and using the right triggers to enter a focused state. One of the most effective ways to train this state is by using time blocking and interval-based work, such as the 90-minute ultradian rhythm. Research shows that human attention naturally cycles through peaks and troughs about every 90 minutes. During these peaks, you can perform at your highest level of cognitive intensity. Scheduling your most important work within these windows and protecting them from interruptions maximizes your brain's biological potential for focus. Outside of these peaks, recovery, whether it's light movement, hydration, or nature exposure, helps reset the system so you can re-engage again later in the day. Deliberate practice goes hand in hand with deep work. It's not just about doing a task repeatedly. It's about doing it with attention, precision, and correction. Deliberate practice breaks down a skill into its components, identifies areas of weakness, and targets them with high effort, high feedback training. This process is uncomfortable. It requires confronting what you're not good at and staying with it long enough to improve. But this is exactly where neuroplasticity happens. The discomfort you feel is not a signal to stop. It's a signal that your brain is learning. In this way, struggle becomes a data point, not a deterrent. To amplify the effect of deep work and practice, feedback is essential. Without feedback, the brain does not know what to correct or reinforce. This can be immediate feedback from a coach, a test, a software, or a measurable result, or reflective feedback like reviewing your work and identifying patterns of error. What matters is that you close the loop between action and outcome. This loop strengthens the circuits responsible for performance and accelerates mastery. Over time, as skills become more automated, cognitive load decreases and performance becomes more fluid and efficient. Eliminating distractions is another critical factor. Every time you check your phone, respond to a notification, or switch tasks, you invoke a cost known as context switching. This cost is not just time, it's cognitive. It takes the brain several minutes to reorient itself after a distraction, and repeated switching depletes mental energy, increases errors, and reduces depth of engagement. Protecting your deep work time with tools like app blockers, notification silencers, or even working offline can dramatically improve your cognitive efficiency. You're not just protecting your time. You're protecting the integrity of your neural training. The long-term effects of consistent deep work and deliberate practice are substantial. Over a 6-month period, what begins as effortful focus becomes fluent execution. What starts as struggle becomes automaticity. The brain develops stronger, more efficient pathways, making high-level performance less energy-consuming and more reliable. This is how expertise is built, not in bursts of inspiration, but in repeated cycles of focused effort, feedback, and correction. Just as importantly, engaging in deep work trains your capacity for sustained attention in all areas of life. You become better at being present in conversations, more strategic in your thinking, and more resistant to the pull of superficial distractions. This mental discipline carries over into how you manage your time, how you approach goals, and how you recover from setbacks. It becomes a core part of your identity, someone who shows up, focuses deeply, and improves consistently. In essence, focused deep work and deliberate practice are not just productivity tools, they are neurobiological accelerators of change. When practiced consistently over 6 months, they create lasting shifts in how your brain operates, allowing you to learn faster, solve problems more effectively, and express your potential with clarity and power. The effort is substantial, but so is the reward. You're not just working, you're rewiring. The ability to build and sustain keystone habits is one of the most effective strategies for transforming your life over a 6-month period. Keystone habits are foundational behaviors that, once established, set off a chain reaction, positively influencing other behaviors, improving systems of thought, and reinforcing identity. They're not just habits in isolation. They are leverage points in the nervous system and psychology that create a ripple effect across multiple domains of performance, health, and mindset. The goal is not to try to overhaul your entire life overnight, but to identify and implement a few high-impact habits that can, over time, lead to exponential growth. One of the core principles behind the power of keystone habits is their influence on identity. When you perform a keystone habit consistently, your brain begins to associate that action with a sense of who you are. For example, if you build the habit of waking up early and exercising, you're not just improving your physical health, you're reinforcing the belief that you are someone who values discipline, self-respect, and resilience. This internal shift strengthens motivation, making it more likely that other behaviors, like eating well, focusing deeply, or managing time effectively, will follow naturally. Neuroscience shows us that repeated behaviors lay down neural patterns, and the more consistently those patterns are activated, the more automatically they fire. The process of establishing a keystone habit begins with clarity. You need to identify which habit, if practiced consistently, would unlock the greatest overall benefit. This varies from person to person, but common keystone habits include morning movement, structured planning, regular journaling, quality sleep routines, or a nutrition framework. Once chosen, it must be made small enough to be repeatable, yet meaningful enough to shift physiology and mindset. Consistency trumps intensity. The brain's reward system, specifically the release of dopamine, responds more powerfully to successful completion of small, clear actions than to big, unsustainable efforts followed by inconsistency or failure. Implementation strategies are crucial in habit formation. One of the most effective is using temporal and contextual anchors. This means linking the habit to a specific time of day or a particular environmental cue. For instance, instead of vaguely deciding to meditate more, you anchor it as 2 minutes of breath work immediately after brushing my teeth in the morning. This specificity reduces cognitive load and minimizes decision fatigue and creates a stable neural link between context and action. Over time, your brain begins to anticipate the behavior based on the context, making the habit feel automatic. The neurological basis of habit formation lies in the basal ganglia, a deep brain structure involved in pattern recognition and action selection. The basal ganglia help encode the cue, routine, reward loop. Initially, habits require conscious effort from the prefrontal cortex, your planning and decision-making center. But with repetition, the behavior shifts to the basal ganglia and becomes more reflexive. This is why starting small is so powerful. It makes the behavior easy enough to repeat regularly, ensuring the basal ganglia can do its job. Once a behavior is encoded as a habit, it requires far less energy to perform, freeing up cognitive resources for higher level thinking and problem solving. Tracking progress is another critical component. Neuroscience shows that the act of monitoring behavior increases the likelihood of continued adherence. Whether it's checking off a box on a habit tracker, writing a short journal entry, or reflecting weekly, self-monitoring creates a feedback loop that reinforces motivation. More importantly, it provides data for adjustment. If a habit slips, the goal is not to quit, but to analyze why the slip occurred and design a better strategy, just as a scientist would refine an experiment based on results. Importantly, keystone habits don't just influence behavior, they alter emotional regulation and stress response. For example, daily movement or breathwork can reduce baseline cortisol levels, improve mood via endorphin and dopamine release, and enhance sleep quality by supporting circadian rhythm regulation. When your physiology is more stable, you're less likely to be derailed by emotional impulses, environmental stressors, or mental fatigue. In this way, keystone habits act as emotional scaffolding. They create a platform of resilience from which other, more complex behaviors can grow. Over a 6-month period, the compounding power of keystone habits becomes undeniable. What starts as a 5-minute habit can evolve into a full lifestyle shift. You become someone who shows up consistently, makes thoughtful decisions, and feels more in control of their time and energy. This consistency builds self-trust, a psychological asset that fuels confidence and long-term motivation. You no longer need to rely on external discipline because your identity begins to match your actions. Social reinforcement also plays a powerful role. When others observe your consistency, you begin to receive feedback that affirms your new behavior and identity. This creates a social reward loop. People see you differently. They begin to reflect back to you the qualities you are embodying, which strengthens your internal belief and commitment. This process can even trigger second-order change, encouraging others around you to adopt new habits, thereby improving your environment and support system. Keystone habits are not about doing more. They are about choosing strategically. One well-selected habit can reduce decision fatigue, enhance energy, sharpen focus, and build momentum. When compounded over days, weeks, and months, this momentum becomes identity, and that identity becomes transformation. Rather than chasing motivation, you're building a structure in your brain and in your life that supports who you are becoming. That is the true power of habit-based change. It's not just behavioral, it's neurological, emotional, and deeply personal. Sleep is not just rest. It is one of the most active and essential components of any effective transformation plan. especially over a focused 6-month period. When we sleep, the brain and body enter a unique state that allows for recovery, adaptation, consolidation of learning, and hormonal regulation. If you are truly committed to lasting change, whether in performance, mental clarity, physical health, or emotional stability, sleep must be treated as a non-negotiable biological priority. It is not an optional luxury, but a core pillar that supports everything else you are trying to build. During deep sleep, the brain engages in critical processes that directly affect your ability to grow and adapt. One of the most important is memory consolidation. Every time you learn a new skill, absorb information, or engage in deliberate practice, your brain creates temporary neural pathways. These pathways are fragile. It is during slow, wave sleep, primarily occurring in the early part of the night, that the brain strengthens and stabilizes these connections, essentially moving them from short-term to long-term storage. Without sufficient deep sleep, much of what you learn during the day is lost or degraded. This has a direct impact on your ability to improve over time. REM sleep, which occurs more in the later half of the night, plays a different but equally crucial role. This is the phase where emotional processing and creative problem solving take place. During REM, the brain integrates experiences, replays social interactions, and tests different solutions to challenges in the absence of conscious interference. It also modulates the sensitivity of the amygdala, the brain's emotional alarm system. In practical terms, this means that when you get high-quality REM sleep, you are better able to regulate your mood, make balanced decisions, and maintain emotional resilience under stress. Physiologically, sleep also controls many of the body's key hormonal systems. Growth hormone, for instance, is released in pulses during deep sleep and is vital for cellular repair, fat metabolism, and muscle development. Testosterone and estrogen regulation also rely on adequate sleep cycles, affecting everything from physical energy to motivation and cognitive sharpness. Cortisol, the body's primary stress hormone, follows a diurnal rhythm that depends on sleep timing. When sleep is poor or irregular, cortisol rhythms become disrupted, leading to poor stress response, higher baseline anxiety, and impaired immune function. Over time, this disruption undermines your ability to think clearly, recover physically, and maintain energy levels. To use sleep as a performance and transformation tool, structure and timing are critical. The circadian rhythm, your internal biological clock, is sensitive to light temperature and behavioral cues. One of the most effective ways to align this clock is through morning sunlight exposure. Getting natural light in your eyes within the first 30-60 minutes of waking helps anchor your rhythm, increasing daytime alertness and setting the stage for optimal nighttime melatonin production. Just 5-10 minutes of direct outdoor light in the morning can have profound effects on your sleep quality that evening. Equally important is your pre-sleep routine. The brain needs time and cues to transition from alertness to sleep readiness. This involves reducing exposure to artificial light, especially blue light from screens, during the final hour before bed, lowering ambient temperature, and engaging in calming activities such as breathwork, light stretching, or non-stimulating reading. These practices help activate the parasympathetic nervous system, signaling to the brain that it's safe to shift into a recovery state. Avoiding stimulants like caffeine after early afternoon and minimizing alcohol use also play a critical role in preserving the integrity of your sleep architecture. The timing of sleep is as important as its duration. The brain's recovery systems operate best when sleep aligns with the natural rhythms of the sun. Going to bed at a consistent time, ideally before midnight, and waking up around the same time each day helps reinforce the biological signals for hormone release, body temperature regulation, and mental clarity. Inconsistent sleep patterns, even if the total hours are similar, create a phenomenon known as social jet lag, which disrupts circadian alignment and impairs cognitive and physical performance. Beyond structure and hygiene, sleep is also a reflection of your overall system regulation. High stress, overtraining, unresolved emotional conflict, or inconsistent routines all manifest in poor sleep. Tracking your sleep patterns through subjective journals or wearable technology can provide valuable insights. If your sleep is fragmented, delayed, or unrestful, it's often a sign that some part of your daytime behavior or physiology needs attention. In this sense, sleep becomes not just a pillar of health, but a diagnostic tool an early indicator of misalignment that can help guide corrective actions. Over a 6-month period, optimizing sleep will act as a force multiplier for everything else you do. Your focus will sharpen, your emotional control will stabilize, your physical energy will rise, and your capacity for learning will accelerate. The changes may not be dramatic overnight, but they are cumulative and compounding. Every night of quality sleep is an investment in a more adaptive, resilient, and high-performing version of yourself. As your brain and body repair, rewire, and refuel each night, they prepare you to meet each day with clarity and intention. Sleep, then, is not passive. It is strategic. It is an active part of your training, your mindset development, and your emotional regulation. Treating it with the same respect and precision as your nutrition work or movement will shift the trajectory of your transformation. It is the silent partner behind every breakthrough, every adaptation, and every moment of insight. Protect it, optimize it, and leverage it, and the long-term benefits will extend far beyond 6 months into every facet of your life.